morning, everyone. Thanks for coming, being part of the session. Today we're looking at study objectives and what it means to define study objectives. Once again, this is a 1-hour session. We'll try to finish at the top of the hour. Please note that we will do the session for 30 minutes and thereafter you can ask any question related to manuscript writing. The questions do not have to be limited to what we're learning today. It can cover scopes beyond what we're learning today. I would appreciate if you can drop your questions in the chat box, so that way I can look at it even as I'm going on and address them as I'm going on. At the end of the day, if we have time, we can then, have you raise your hands and ask questions. Sorry, I'm also at the same time managing the admin room, so as to allow people to enter in time. So why are study objectives important? Why must we clearly write our study objectives? This is because the study objectives guides the research design. Remember, once again, when we hold this session, our point is for you to get your manuscript published in high-impact journals. The reason why you write study designs properly is because when your reviewer is looking at your study design, at that very point, there's clarity about and when the reviewer is looking at your objective, there's clarity about what the study design should be, and I'll show you how. There's clarity from that point, and therefore once you start to deviate from what your study design or study objective guides the reviewer to understand about what the study design should be, you're already putting yourself in a position for reject. So study objectives need to be very clear. And once the study objective is clear, then the research design is clear. Once again, your study design or study objectives is usually a clear, concise statement of what the research aims are. I do appreciate that many studies will usually design, and we have one objective, but more and more studies are having multiple study objectives, because multiple study objectives tends to be more reflective of the human existence. It's more holistic, but it's also more complex. As you grow and become more competent with manuscript writing, you'll find out that you are more competent in addressing multiple study objectives at the same time. But it's not easy to pull it together in a way that is meaningful and they're not unnecessarily interfering with themselves. Otherwise, you will be having problem with collinearity and you truly would not be able to say what you need to say. Once again, also, the study objectives need to be clear, because that is the measure of success of your research. Have you achieved the aim you want to achieve? You decide that this candidate, even when you're looking at thesis, or this author, when you're looking at manuscripts, has achieved the aim of the study by continuously referring to the study objective. The study objectives oftentimes becomes the midpoint of relationship between your introduction, which is justifying why you want to do the study, and the results, your report in your discussion. So it's very critical. Of course, it helps in the allocation of resources, and many times when you want to communicate with your funder, it's your study objective. Your study objective makes it very clear to the funder that your study is aligned with the objective of the grant. Okay? So it's very important. There needs to be clarity with it. And in the next 20 minutes thereabout, I'll be taking you through how to write a study objective that is quite clear, not ambiguous. It's clear and it's measurable. Okay? So what are study objectives? Once again, the objectives is an active statement about how the study is going to answer a specific research question. And it helps you choose the building blocks, the elements, the variables for your studies. The variables you want to study will be clearly articulated in your objective. If you remember what we talked about in the last 2 weeks, your introduction starts to justify why you need to do the study. It tells us what is known. It gradually leads us to what is not known, and then it makes a definitive statement about which gap in knowledge you want to answer. Within that introduction, you develop either your theoretical framework or conceptual framework, which gives evidence or a basis or a fundamental for why every single variable you want to study should be included. Your objective is that point that now pulls it out, pulls it together, and makes it clear what variables you'll be finding in your methodology. So what do we look for in a study objective? I'm sure every single one of you here understand about what it means for a study objective to be SMART. SMART is an acronym with S standing for specificity, M standing for measurable, A standing for achievable, R standing for reliable, and C standing for time-bound. When we talk about specificity, we mean that there's clarity about what needs to be done. There's clarity about what needs to be done. Measurable means the right study design was determined. It is possible for you to be clear about what you're doing, and then you use an unmeasurable method. A method that would not measure the objective, and we'll go into that. It's also important that it's not only specific and measurable, it is achievable. The variables you want to measure, are achievable. And the methods you want to use to measure these variables are reliable, which takes us to your R. And finally, the study you want to do is within a time period that is able to generate a data that is generalizable. Now let's go into each of these elements. When we talk about specificity, S standing for the S of SMART, specificity standing for the S in the SMART. What you're saying is that this objective needs to be precise. It has to be precise. There's no ambiguity. There's no misinterpretation of what you want to do. There's no alternative interpretation to be what you want to do. This is one example of an objective that I can tell you is not specific. This is an example of an objective that I can tell you is not specific. What I need from you as participants is to let me know what is not specific about this objective. If there's anyone who would like to try, please would you raise your hands and then you can unmute your mic and tell me what is not specific about the study objective. Is there anyone who would like to try? Anyone? Thank you very much. Koforala Ishola, please unmute your mic and tell us what you think is not specific about the study objective.
Good morning, Ma.
Good morning.
The socio-demographic profile is what I think is not objective because there are so many things that make up a socio-demographic profile. Is it the age? Is it socioeconomic status of the individual? Is it the religion? Is it the ethnic group that we're talking about?
Excellent. So you have somebody excellent. Thank you so much. Doshima, you'll also have the opportunity. This is one of the many things here that makes this not specific. You say socio-demographic profile, and this is one of the commonest errors I find. Now just hold on, Doshima, I'll get to you. This is one of the commonest errors we find when you're writing objectives. You say you want to determine association before with socio-demographic profile, whereas there are over 32 variables, 32 socio-demographic variables. You heard Dr. Shola list some. She couldn't even finish. She knew she hadn't finished. And then when you go ahead and write this, and your reviewer, whereas in your heart, what you want to do is sex and age, then the reviewer now starts telling you, why didn't you look at urban-rural differences? Why didn't you explore, income differences? And then you'll be worrying, but I wasn't interested in that. She's going to pull you, or the reviewer is going to pull you to look at that because there are possibilities to explore these variables in your study because you did not define what you wanted to study. So thank you, that was brilliant. Socio-demographic profile was a problem with this study. It was not specific. Yoshima, please, what else do you find unspecific in the study objective?
Okay, thank you, Prof. In addition to what Dr. Shola said, it's a compound objective in addition because and their menstrual cycle, so it makes it very ambiguous and very wide.
Thank you very much. It talks about their menstrual cycle. So who is this dear? Thank you, Doshima. Who's this dear? We're talking about females. Is it female 0 to 1 year old? Is it 0 to 40 years old? Is it 0 for eternity? Is it elderlies? Is it young persons? You don't even know who this dear is. The profile of the females you are dealing with is not known. Say age range. You can't be looking at menstrual cycle for new infants and neonates. Neither would you be looking at menstrual cycles for elderlies, 70 years and above. But even at that, you are making me assume you are not defining your age. You are not defining the dear. Having looked at that, menstrual cycle is a cycle. Are you looking at the entire cycle, or are you looking at a phase in the cycle? You are leaving me to assume. You are leaving me as your reader to assume. But the worst of this is that there's no country profile. Are you looking at the females in Nigeria, or the females in West Africa, or the females in the world? You can see that despite what looks like an objective, this is an objective that is not specific. You want to determine association, which is good. We'll probably see that this is measurable, but this is not specific. Socio-demographic profile is a problem. If it's age, sex, and socioeconomic status you want to look at, then put it with precision. Why? Because there are tools to measure age. There are two standard tools to measure sex. There are standard tools to measure socioeconomic status. And this is what I'll be looking for in your methodology. Right now, with your socio-demographic profile, I'm going to be expecting 1,000,001 things. And if you decide to do things that is beyond my own expectation, not defined in your introduction, then it's a problem. Most likely you got to this point in not defining your socio-demographic profile, not defining female age bounds, not defining the menstrual cycle, and using there because your introduction did not use a conceptual framework. If you have the conceptual framework, if you have the theoretical framework, it is clear what your variables are. And therefore, defining the variables for your objective becomes easy. What you have done is that what led us to this kind of objective is that the introduction was not specific. Once again, there was no conceptual framework. There was no theoretical framework that backed the defining your variable. So you are going to go shopping for what is an association. You'll just be looking around, just doing all kinds of associations, like all kinds of things. In one analysis, your variable might be the dependent. In another analysis, the variable can become the independent. But in another analysis, it can just become the confounder. You are shopping for an association. This is what happens with this kind of things. And if you're working towards a Q1, Q2 journal, it will not work. Thank you very much, Dr. Ishola and Doshima, for the contribution. Now we're going to measurable. Remember, we're dealing with SMART. S for specific, M for measurable. When we talk about measurable, we expect that your objectives will be drawing boundaries around what you want to explore. You want to explore A, B, C. You want to measure A, B, C. That means your objectives must show clarity about identifying the explanatory and outcome variables. You must be able to see it in your study. So we had looked already at what is not specific. Now we want to critique this objective through the lens of measurability. This individual says, the study objective is to identify the relationship between socio-demographic profile of females in their menstrual cycle. We won't go into the issue of specificity again. We know that socio-demographic profile makes it unspecific. The fact that there's no age bound for the females makes it unspecific. The fact that it's a menstrual cycle, well, maybe that is okay, but then menstrual cycle also have phases. Maybe you might be one more specific. I'm looking at the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. And the absence of defining the geographical location or the population where you want to measure this also makes it a problem. Are we dealing with all women in the world? Are we dealing with women living in rural Nigeria? Or are we dealing with all women living in one local government in Nigeria? This makes it a problem. But now we want to look at what is not measurable. Is there anyone here who may want to help define what is not measurable about the study objective? Anyone, please just raise your hand and then I'll call you. Okay, there's somebody. Tomiwa Adedire, please unmute your mic and tell us what you think is or not measurable about the study objective. You have to unmute your mic, Tomiwa. Tomiwa, can you unmute your mic? Or
okay,
Toby,
just
okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah. Good morning,
All
Prof. I think the word relationship here is wrong. I think an association would have allowed us to actually know if these variables are actually measurable. Maybe using the word like association between, not relationship specifically.
Thank you very much. That's excellent, Tomiwa. So the problem here is relationship. And I'm sure a number of people we met will wonder why. When you're talking about measurability, you are looking at a statistical relationship between your variables. Relationship is not measurable. What tool? Can anybody tell me what tools there are to measure relationship? It doesn't exist. If you say you want to identify the associations, then I know the tools. I might be looking at chi-square. I might be looking at using regression, odds ratio. That's logistic regression analysis. I might choose linear regression. I mean, there are many tools I have in my hands to measure associations. If I say I want to look at correlation, I know what I'm going to use for assessing correlation. If I want to measure trends, I know what to look for. If I want to measure relative risk, I know what to measure. But when you say you want to measure relationship, there is no tool that exists for measuring relationship. All the parameters I've talked about, trends, associations, correlations, are all relationships. What you have here is not measurable. Thank you very much, Tomiwa. Please lower your hands. The issue about identify also becomes a problem. What you usually do is either you're assessing or determining. When you're identifying, but how will I know that you have finally identified? How do I? You remember what I said at the beginning? When you have a study objective, let me go back to the very beginning. When you have a study objective, it becomes a criteria for measuring the success of your research, for measuring if you have finally answered the questions. So when I have an objective that is saying I want to identify, it is only you that can determine that you have identified. Nobody else can identify, because it's you that are looking for the identification. But if you say you want to assess if there is an association between socio-demographic profile and menstrual cycle, then I know you have gotten there. I hope I have clarity with what I'm explaining. If you do have questions, please feel free to put it in the chat box. Otherwise, you raise your hands at the end of the question session. We're now going to the A, SMART. Remember, that's what we're looking for in our objective. Specific, measurable, we're at the A now. Achievable. When we talk about achievable, we expect your objectives to be practical and doable. This objective, the study as defined by objective, must be doable. And therefore, your reviewers, when you submit your manuscript, you'll be looking at the objective that is not broad, That's one of the things I was saying at the beginning. Many times your study design will only have a single objective. But if you have to have competency to be able to do a study that has more than one objective, because it is complex. to pull in a study, a single study, when you're looking at 2-3 objectives on a list of 4-5. I mean, it's a skill. Your skill would move you to do 2-3. By the time you are going to 3 is come. If you're going to 4-5, I mean, you're out of it. If you can, pulling multiple objectives allow you to be more holistic in looking at, in relating those variables to the realities of men. Men are not in silos. They are a mixture of things, but it takes skills. So when it's, as much as possible, make your objectives simple, not broad, measurable, doable. And you are also, with achievable, you're also looking at study design. So let's look at this objective below based on the lens of achievable. This individual has modified our study objective and gotten to this point. This individual wants to measure the impact of age and ethnicity of 15 to 19-year-old females on their menstrual flow. You would see that this objective has improved in terms of specificity. This individual is not looking at all the females from 0 days old to eternity. This individual is not looking at menstrual flow in 15 to 19-year-old females. Brilliant. An improvement in specificity. It's also not looking at the entire menstrual cycle. It's looking at their menstrual flow. Excellent. But yet, this study objective still has a problem in terms of achievability. Is there anyone here who might help us identify what is not likely not to be achievable with this study objective? Yoshima, please go ahead and unmute your mic and let us know. Thank you.
Okay, Prof. I think it is the fact that it's going to measure the impact.
Okay, very good.
Impact.
Brilliant. Yes. Yeah. Okay, very good. Excellent. I'll take that forward. Thank you, Doshima.
Thank you.
Impact, when you want to measure the impact of age, what you're saying is that you are going to do a longitudinal study. Straight. A longitudinal study that is 5 to 10 years. You can never measure impact by cross-sectional study. You can never measure impact with a study of 1 year, 2 years. If you do a study after 1 year, 2 years, you may say you are measuring effect. And your effect might be measured through your inferential analysis, but you can never measure impact until you have been in that situation over a period of time. This is the headache with this thing. And I'm emphasizing it because I see it so often. I remember I was in a group at the first year of the pandemic when they collected data, that the objective was impact. And I say it's not possible. Impact, of course, is nice, it's English, but in statistical terms, it's not possible. And I can tell you that you can do this and you can get published. It's not as if you can't get published, but your paper would not be pulled into a meta-analysis. The paper will just be that your paper and it's out there, you get your promotion, but it's hanging. Nobody finds it relevant because that study could never have, you couldn't have, it is only now that we can start measuring the impact of COVID. Even now, it's still early. Ideally, this is third year into COVID, right? You're still going to measure effects. When you're saying impact, go and read it. Impact is, the earliest time you measure impact is 5 years. The ideal time is 10 years. So somebody wants to measure the impact. That is a problem. The second problem here is if the study is happening in Nigeria, there's a problem of ethnicity. In America, there are probably just 3 broad ethnic groups, the white and the black, and the Hispanics, Hispanics or non-Hispanics. In Nigeria, we have 354 or 400, and depending on how ethnic, broad, 300 and something. So this is not achievable. Check with groups. What is your sample size going to be? You can't finish measuring your sample size if you are doing ethnicity in Nigeria of 357 people. So that becomes a problem. And then, of course, to measure. What does it mean to measure the impact? So you can end up finding a study objective that is specific but it's not achievable. You can have a specific objective that is not measurable the way you defined it. So these are problems. These are little things you must take into consideration. And that is why it's not paper to write a paper once. I was with my colleagues and we were reviewing our paper together and we were on the 7th review. And my colleague was upset. This is the 7th review. And I said, I beg, I don't know how to do this. So we're going to review this paper until the point where we get to the point when it goes out and the reviewers will only see minor errors. We always get there with the papers we do. And I have gone through with senior colleagues who went to 27 reviews, 27 before it went out. Of course, when it went out, it came back, we had no problems. So you can't send the paper out on the first or second review. There are people who are critic. The reviewers that will review you, let them review you before you send it out. So that when your papers are out, there's minimal error. And please be welcoming of error. It's very important. Remember, when you do research, it's not about you, it's not about your promotion, it's about addressing a need in the society. Excellent. Thank you, everyone that has participated in this. Now we're going to the next one, R, reliable. So we've done specific, we've done measurable, we've done accurate. We are now at R, reliable. Reliable refers to consistency in measure. Sometimes when something is reliable in science, it means there's consistency. It's consistency. That is why, I don't know if you've been with me, I keep saying it over and over. When you have studies and you have to use tools to measure, you must look for a tool that has been established to be reliable. Reliability means the construct and the content validation has been done. I repeat, reliable says at the minimum, the construct and content validation has been done. There are multiple ways of doing this. Content validation has been done, construct validation has been done, which means that once that tool is used to measure that phenomenon, you can rest assured that is that phenomenon it will measure. Whether it's in America, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Nigeria, this tool measures this phenomenon. And therefore, if you want to use it in different tools, you can adopt or adapt, but it is measuring the phenomenon is set to measure. Now let's look at this objective. What may not be reliable in this objective? You want to determine the association. Very good. This is measurable. Between dress colors and mood changes of adolescent females. Very good. This is specific. During their menstrual periods. Very good. This is specific. So you have a specific objective. You have a measurable objective. But this objective is not likely to be reliable. Can anybody help me identify what may be unreliable with the study objective? Anyone? Anyone who wants to give it a try? Okay. Because of our time, I'll go ahead and answer this. One thing that might not be reliable about this objective is the dress colors. How do you measure dress colors consistently? Knowing what we have magenta, green, and coconut red, and pepper color brown. What is the parameter there is that consistently measure dress color? Knowing that the dress color that is blue today, the minute I put it inside the water and I wear it tomorrow, that blue changes a tinge. So I'm not sure there is a reliable way to measure dress colors. That's a problem. Mood changes, they just might be psychological parameters, but mood changes also has a risk of not being measurable in a reliable fashion, except there are psychological tools that measures mood changes. So when you start to measure, put into your study objectives variables that you cannot measure reliably, you're going to have a problem of reliability. If you repeat this test 50 times over, you will not get the same result 50 times over, because the dress colors will keep changing. And another thing that will change dress colors is the risk of the assessors. People are colorblind. What you see as green, somebody else will see it as blue. What you see as blue, somebody else that is measuring will see it as yellow. Inconsistency in the measure of colors, that makes it a difficult problem. Reliability requires that when you measure tools, use tools that have been, if you are creating a tool, which I see many times scientists do, if you to create a tool, you must show that it's a reliable tool. You must show the content validation, construct validation, and reliability. Reliability measures also. There's a whole paraphernalia about measuring tools. Okay, so that is reliable. And then we do time. Oh, geez, I lost a slide, time bound. I forgot, there's a time-bound slide, T. Your study must be done within a time frame. And that is when you write your objective, there must be a T. You collected this data in January to February of 2020. Because what happened in 2020 is definitely not the same as in 2023. Remember, between 2020 and 2023, there's been COVID, there's been vaccinations, there's been many things, and therefore the situation in 2020 will not be the same in 2023. But this becomes very specific in the example I showed when you are doing systematic reviews. When you do systematic review and you're looking at climate change, the effect of climate change on menstrual flow. Geez, climate change has happened since the day the world was created. Be it through the Bible or the Quran or whichever way it happened, or the bank. So when are you looking at this? Is it over a 5-year period? Is it over a 10-year period? So timeliness of what you're doing matters. The period when you're going to collect is very important that you define this where applicable. Let's now look at what it means to relate your study objective to the options, the study design. There are multiple study designs, and there's an hierarchy of research evidence. Ideas when nothing exists in terms of knowledge over an issue, ideas, opinions, definitely counts. Case studies and case series starts to build a case of evidence, but it is not strong evidence. Most studies around the world, and in Nigeria, about 98% of our studies are cross-sectional studies, but they are very low evidence. Why? Because cross-sectional studies only tell you what is happening at a point in time. At a point in time. Longitudinal studies are better able to give you a sense of what is or really are. But cross-sectional studies are point-in-time studies. The others are longitudinal studies, case control studies, core studies, or randomized or clinical trials. Case control studies are longitudinal studies, but they are retrospectives. You are at the end where you want to be. That means that you are outcome, and then you are looking back in time to what may have caused these outcomes. That's the difference with case studies. And because it's retrospective, it is lower in evidence than cohort, which is prospective. Cohort and case studies are both longitudinal studies. So case control, you look at a group of people, a cohort of people who have the disease, and then you look back in time to what is the difference between people that have these diseases and don't have these diseases that could have accounted for the problem. Or you are at the end with people that have this problem, people that don't have this problem. You look back in time in their history. What is it in their history that could have accounted for the difference in this problem? That's case control. The headache with this case control is that you will be depending on recall, the ability of those people to recall, to think through, to think well about what their history is. Unlike cohort studies, which are studies that start with groups of people and follow them into the future and start to see, oh, these people have this disease, oh, these people don't have this disease. But because you follow them into the future, you know what might be the variables that is making a distinction. All right, so let's look at the case of lung cancer, which is the common example. So if I have lung cancer, I have people that have lung cancer, people that don't have lung cancer. I look back in their history. What is it in their history that distinguishes these people that have lung cancer and those that don't have lung cancer? That is case control. Whereas in cohort studies, you just have people, adolescents in secondary school in their Form 1 and follow them up until when they graduate university. And look at those that develop lung cancer and those that didn't develop lung cancer, and look at what is it in their history that made a distinction. That's the difference. However, in randomized clinical trial, which is the epitome of evidence, what you look for is 2 groups of people at the minimum. Everything about the 2 groups is exactly the same. And the way you make them exactly the same is the randomization, because there are clinical trials that are not randomized, but the height of evidence is the randomization. Randomized clinical trials, the randomization makes it possible that these 2 groups of people I am starting with at the very beginning are exactly the same. And then I follow them all for a period of time, 3 years, 4 years, with one having an intervention, the other not having an intervention. I can therefore see at the end of 3 to 4 years that it is this intervention that made the difference, because they are all the same except that intervention. One group got it, another group didn't get it. So whatever my result is, I can say that is that intervention that made a difference. And of course, then is the systematic review and meta-analysis, which is said to be superior, because systematic reviews and meta-analysis prove the results of multiple randomized clinical trials. So they tend to be more powerful. But then, randomized clinical trials that are very big. We have randomized clinical trials that are recruiting people around the world, and there are 15,000, 19,000, which is one of the excellent piece of work that WHO did during COVID. Those kind of randomized clinical trials have more powerful evidence than systematic reviews. So those are the kind of reviews or studies you have. If you're doing qualitative studies, it's usually at this level of cross-sectional, because it's observational, it's descriptive. Cross-sectional studies can also be analytical, but qualitative studies are usually cross-sectional, descriptive. So when we link your study objectives with your research design, this is how it is. The designs, I said, can be, I told you the hierarchy, but we can divide it into filtered, because when you're doing systematic review or meta-analysis, you're pulling different results from these unfiltered ones. Unfiltered ones are the ones that generate primary study. The systematic meta-analysis and evidence-based clinical practice guidelines have pulled in and have chosen the best and pulled and gotten a result. So if you're looking at therapies, you want to look at the determined domain. If you want to determine the efficacy of therapies, these are the kind of stuff. So if your study design suggests that you are looking at a therapy, in my head, immediately I know your study design would be a randomized clinical trial cohort. As you're going down, the evidence is less. You don't use expert opinion case studies. What you use definitely for therapies is randomized clinical trials. If you're looking for etiology, the etiology of a disease is usually longitudinal. It's either you're looking for a randomized clinical or a cohort study. If you're looking for prognosis, the right study design would be a cohort study. If you're looking for diagnosis, you're looking for cohort study or absolute spin-in or spin-out. If you're looking for an economic analysis, you're looking at cost or cost-effectiveness analysis. So there are ideal things that go for your study design. Your research question tells me, okay, this is the design that I'm expecting. This is the design that I'm expecting. Okay, it might be complex, but this is what we need to know. Well, it's not complex, but just to let you know that there's that link. At this point in time, I want to thank you for listening, and I look forward to questions. Once again, please feel free to ask questions that are directly or not directly related to what we've done today. I'll go through quite a number of questions. I'll go through them. Henry says, please, is it possible with the recording and introduction with the audio is shared? Let me tell you why, Henry, I don't bother. I care less to share recordings. If I take and you take your time to come for this session, why should I be recording? I could as well never hold this session and record everything and send to you guys. So it's important that you're here. That's why I'm making it physical. And you don't have to be. None of us have to spend the time here. I could record and send to all of you. So I'm not keen. I know people keep asking, I'm not committed to it, and I'm not going to be committed to sending. If I have it, if Toby is kind enough to share with me at the end of the session, please know this is my university link, and I'm grateful for my university for sharing this. It's a 500 capacity size. I'm sure you know that that's expensive. So my university is working through this. If they give it to me, I'll share. If they don't, I won't ask. And I'm not committed to asking. So yes, I apologize for that. Or I don't apologize, it's just my position. So how about STC? Henry, ask how about STC and then specify those you interested in output. I don't understand that question, Henry. Please, can you make it clearer? I apologize, I don't understand that question. Fumilola Adeshinyo asks, good morning. Please, can you clarify the difference between to identify and to an object? I don't understand the question, please. I feel you're saying that an objective that says I want to identify. I said it's not clear, it's not measurable. When you say you want to identify, it's only you, it's only you, the researcher, that knows what you want to identify. Me, the reviewer, I don't know what you want to identify, because it's only you as an author that will know what you wanted to identify that you have identified. So it's not a measurable objective. Once you have an objective that is measurable, it means whoever it is around the world knows what you want to do. It is clear what you are going for. But when you're identifying, it's just you alone that knows it. Me, as a reviewer, I'm going to have to depend on you telling me that you have identified. If you tell me that you want to assess for the association, I know what it is with clarity, because it's all of us, it's open to all of us. So that's the problem with using the word identify. It's not assess, you can't assess if you have there's no clarity about what the outcome wants to be, because you are the one determining what the outcome. It is you identify. I don't know if that helps. Okay, thank you about it. Yes. So it's better to say you want to assess, not assess as CC, is assess as ASSESS. That's subjective. Identify is subjective. You want to assess ASSESS, or to determine. You want to determine. Okay. That I would see, we know with clarity, but to identify, it's you that will now say, oh, I've identified or not. So there's that, it's not used in a standard way, that way. So Doshima asked, in the hierarchy of research evidence, where qualitative is cross-sectional. Cross-sectional can be descriptive or analytical, okay? So the descriptive cross-sectionals are qualitative because you're measuring things at a point in time. However, there are ethnographic studies that are done qualitatively that follows you up over a long period of time. It's still descriptive, but they don't usually call it quote. You know, the ethnographic studies, people stay for 3, 4, 5 years. I've had a friend who stayed in Nigeria for 10 years as a qualitative researcher to understand the drug market in Idumota. And she wrote a book which is brilliant. But then qualitative studies are all completely lumped into that cross-sectional descriptive analysis. I think it can be better done, and these are things that we keep looking at as going forward. Even this evidence of hierarchy that it is still variable. You know, knowledge keeps evolving and getting better, and people ask questions, what about this? But actually, qualitative studies are just lumped as descriptive cross-sectionals. Dr. Obeta says, if you are carrying out a case study, what will you look for? I'm not sure. I apologize, I actually don't know. Case study, I don't know what case studies. I guess you mean case series or case report. I don't know what case studies. I apologize. But if you're talking about case series, case report, it's just pulling reports of incidents, reports of a case. You know, you're pulling it. So we could have a case study. That means this person you're just describing one event that happened. But when you look at case series, you pull multiple of people having that report, and you're starting to say, oh, maybe there's something here. I know case study. Oh, okay, sorry. Yes, there's case study. Yes, better, sorry. There's case study in qualitative research. In case study of a qualitative, you are looking at a situation and studying it. that is qualitative. Like I said, all qualitative studies are descriptive cross-sectional studies. And in case study, it's an intensive analysis of what may be, causing an issue. I don't know what your objective is when you decide to use a case study. But case study is like, because I've done a case study before, you're using it to tell or validate a position or something. I apologize. I mean, I'm rambling here, but one is qualitative, and it's qualitative. Qualitatives are cross-sectionals and very low in evidence, and they don't tell you about therapies. You probably might be looking at, not etiology, something specific, I guess, something very specific that is cross-sectional actually in outlook. I hope that helps you better. If it's not, please ask your question in a more clarifying way, and I could help. Apologies, I may not have done well with that question. Emmanuel GT says, please, can you explain the difference between case control, retrospective studies, and case control? I didn't say case control, retrospective studies. I didn't use that word. There's no such word. It's case control or cohort study. There's no case control prospective studies. I never used that word, and there's no such word. It's either you're doing a case control or you're doing a cohort study. In cohort studies, it is longitudinal, but you are looking at it prospective. In case control, it's longitudinal, but you are looking at it retrospectively. And what I said is that in case control, you look at the end, the outcome. You start with the outcome. Somebody has lung cancer, somebody does not have lung cancer. You look back in their history and identify what it is that could have made this person have lung cancer and this person not have lung cancer. In cohort studies, you start with a group of people, children that were born on Sundays, and you go forward for 5, 10, 15 years and see which ones develop what problem. Some people develop infertility, some people don't develop infertility. But you've collected their records and say, oh, this is what it is that made these people develop fertility or not. Infertility. The headache with that, which makes it different from randomized clinical trial, is that there's so many confounders. Some, went to Lagos and some lived in Edo. Some, when they went to Lagos, actually came back to Edo. And so some that went to Edo went to Kaduna and spent 3 years. There are so many confounders in the lives of those people that makes it difficult to conclusively say about the evidence you have, unlike randomized clinical control trials. And randomized trials can happen. It doesn't have to be only in medicine. You use control trials everywhere, social sciences, arts. In those places, everything is controlled. The only difference is in the intervention you have. So you can always conclusively say it was that intervention caused the problem. I hope that helps. Emmanuel. Ogo says, please, how can one get tools that have content and construct validation? Excellent questions. Anytime you look for your tools, they would have told you that they did the content and construct validation, and they will tell you the scores for the outcome. Any tool you use, go look for tools. There's really nothing new under the sun. You can create, but it's better you adopt or adapt those tools. If you want to measure blood flow, then there might be a tool. Look for it. What studies have done blood flow? What instrument did they use to measure blood flow? If you want to measure mood colors and mood changes, go look for the tools. If you want to measure anxiety, there are tools. You want to measure sexual and reproductive health, there's tools. Most NDHLs have tools for many of these things. Just adopt or adapt. Adopt says you take it. Adapt says, oh, this tool exists, but this tool was used amongst Americans. I want to use it for Nigerians. The way we talk, Americans says traffic, we say go slow. Those are content validation. The language must be more applicable. So you'll adapt it. You do a content or a construct or a callback analysis just to make sure that that tool is applicable in this region. So you can adapt. Or if what you used was among elderly, you now want to use it among young people, it's a different ballgame. The language is not different, the context is not different. So you'll adapt it by looking at how it's applicable, But if you now develop a tool from beginning, you have to ensure it's reliable. So you must do construct, content, and reliability and validation for it. Content means what it's saying. Is everybody interpreting it the same way? Because the same word may not mean the same thing for everybody. So you must ensure that you're using the word, the phenomenons in a way that everybody is interpreting the same thing. And reliability, you will do it to the same people. 2 weeks later, you do it. If there's a distinction between what I answered today and 2 weeks, I'm interpreting it different, then there's a problem with that too. And there are measures to say this is valid. Okay, so there are tools, look for it. But if you create tools, please, you must standardize it. Sorry, apologies, it's getting very slippery to go through the questions. What are the tools for developing objective of a research? Or better, there are no tools for developing an objective of a research. Your objective must be SMART. And that's what we've done for the last 1 hour. How to ensure that your objective is SMART. That's what we did. There's no tool for developing an objective. The lead is just for you to make it SMART, and we've spent the day making it SMART. Thanks, Aline. It says recording helps to reinforce I believe you, but I'm not committed to it. I've said that from day one forever. I'm not committed to it. If once I have it, I share it. If I don't have it, I'm not going to force people to make it available for me. Yeah, like I said, that's my philosophy. I apologize. If we're going to spend time, I could as well record all the sessions and just send it to everybody. But I want you to come listening. I'm sacrificing the time to be here. Also sacrifice the time to care. If you take 10% out of it, it is perfect. Because you're going to continue to learn. Even myself, I was at a session on Friday. I was learning. Okay, so we're going to continue to learn all our life. But if you're here and you learn just one thing, that's good enough. Excellent. Even if I send the recording and you listen to it 50 times, each time you're going to be learning something new. All right? Excellent. Thanks for understanding with me. It's my own peculiarity. Can an objective be to develop and assess the effectiveness of a particular thing? Yes. The objective can be to develop. Okay, but there are 2 objectives you've launched. Objectives, each one must be different. You want to develop and assess the effectiveness. So once you're doing your parameters, there are 2 things. Your result will give you 2 outcomes. The development is 1 outcome. Assess the effectiveness of a particular tool. I'm not sure you assess it. We don't assess effectiveness of tools. You other assessing sensitivity or specificity of tools. Effectiveness is not tools. You don't measure effectiveness of tools. You measure sensitivity or specificity or those kind of parameters for tools. I hope that helps. Thank you, Prof. For studies that determine the prevalence or trend of the disease, what study is cross-sectional? Studies that look for, those are surveys that are observational cross-sectional studies. Studies that look for prevalence and trend are cross-sectional studies. Olumide asks, will a quasi-experimental also fall under? Quasi-experimental is not cross-sectional. Quasi-experimental is, once you say experimental, you're talking about an intervention. Once you say there's experimental, there's an intervention. Once you say there's an intervention, what you have to define what it is a clinical trial. Is it randomized? Is it not randomized? Is it quasi-experimental? But the level of evidence when it's not randomized is the problem. I hope that helps. Sorry, it says the audio is skipping. Maybe it's my internet. I apologize for that. Roberta says finding out dressing pattern of female. Example, finding out dressing pattern of female students. A case study. Finding out dressing patterns of finding out. It cannot be. I'm lost. I apologize. I mean, I have to think through this critically. Finding out. How are you finding out? That word itself is a problem. Finding out dressing pattern of female students in Nigeria. Abia State, a case study. Actually, I apologize. Case studies, when you say case studies, you're doing qualitative studies. When you say, if there are words for, there are words in research, they're almost like words. What words means? There's English meaning of words, but there's research meaning of words. Within the context of words, you kind of understand. When you say case study, straight is qualitative study. So when you're finding out pattern, you can't do pattern in qualitative study. You can't do pattern. It's quantitative study that will generate pattern for you. So when you now mix what's in my head, you see how I'm struggling as a reviewer. You are finding out dress pattern, and then you are doing case study. It's difficult. It's not impossible. You know, I tell you, people are evolving methodologies by the day, brilliant methodologies. But for me at this point in time, this is a challenge. I can't pull it together. Okay. We have 5 more minutes. Ronke Akinola asked, what category of studies would we put the study of retina in patients with diabetes when there's a control group? Is a clinical trial? I don't know what type of clinical trial, but there's a control group. It's a clinical trial because you're putting study of retina and diabetes. When you say there's a control group, there's a control group. Well, all those things are context. You're asking me out of context. When you say there's a control group, my heart goes to clinical trial. But maybe you're looking at case and control. Look, I don't know what you are looking for. And maybe you have a case already. You are starting as a case control. You look at case, you look at control, then it's a case control. If you are looking at control and you're looking and there's an intervention, then there's a clinical trial. But I'm sure, okay, I have a feeling you know what you're doing. You're just wanting to put me on the spot. I'm sure you have your answer. I'm very sure. Yeah. Because I don't understand. If it's case control, it's case control now. So case control is case control study. So I'm not sure. Thanks for better. I hope I answered your question in any little way. If I still don't, please feel free to ask on the platform. I think I've come to the end of all questions that people are leaving. It's just 3 minutes to the end. If I haven't answered your question well, please feel free to ask the questions on the platform. I will continue to answer on any of the platform, be you on Research Orb, Manuscript Orb, or in any of the 1 to 7 spokes. On that note, I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye.